It's about the role of the online tutor and in-time responsiveness to students in a large enrolment unit. So partly about how managing a large enrolment unit and how we can support students through discussion forums in views. So it's a views-based strategy within this context. So I'm at the School of Social Sciences and Psychology. So what I'm going to do in this presentation, I'm going to give you an overview of the unit so you can see what the unit is about, how it's designed, what's been blended and why. Then look at the integration of the online tutor with assessments and learning activities, a bit about what the online tutor does, principles that guide the online tutor's practice, and some concluding remarks. I've had an online tutor in my large units for some time now, and the original work that I did in this area, I'd like to recognise the original online tutor who has since left, Anne Gilchrist, and also Rosemary Thompson from the Teaching Development Unit, who assisted me with the early work on this area. All right, so the unit overview. This is a unit called the Individual in Society. It has about 1,000 students, a few more than 1,000 students. It's a first year unit in spring session, so I'm just about done with it now for this semester. And it's a core unit in the social sciences courses plus a popular elective, and it's delivered across 2 campuses. So that's really the brief overview of it. And what I was thinking, how can I give you an idea of what this unit is in a succinct way as possible, and there's so many different ways of cutting this. So I've sort of just decided to go with giving you a little bit about the unit design with delivery mode, and I know it should be learning mode, but we won't get ahead of ourselves here. The compulsory assessments, what I'm calling supporting assessments, or incentive assessments if you like, and resources. And it's reasonably traditional in terms of there's lectures, content lectures, and there's an examination which examines that content. And then there are tutorials, and the tutorials support written work in written assignments in a literature report and a learning journal, which is done through the work that they do in the tutorials. And these supporting assessments, such as online quizzes and a workbook and reader, so again, support the tutorial work and those assignments, and they're preparatory to the tutorials, and students can gain marks by completing those in a timely fashion. The resources, which I've just represented here, contain, well, there are resources for lectures, but there's, so far as the tutorials go, which is what we're really focusing on, there are things like model assignments, referencing resources, FAQs, and so on. So there's quite a number of resources related to those assignments, and that the online tutor, as we get to, connects students to as part of the role. Okay, so what has been blended? Well, if you take blended learning as being really a reduction in face-to-face time and a replacement or an enhancement by using some online time, what I've done in this unit is reduce the number of face-to-face tutorial times, but I've rearranged it in somewhat. So through the semester, students do 4 by 2 hour tutorials. Like was mentioned before, I believe you can do more in 2 hours than you can do in 1 hour, well, they're 50 minutes, but you know, you get the idea. And that because there's such a large number of students, that if I were to do all the tutorials in 1 week, I'd have to have like 40 tutorials. And so I don't do that. I have 20 tutorials and I alternate them. And this has a couple of efficiency and quality and consistency payoffs, I think. One is that I need fewer tutors, because the tutors can also alternate. So even though the students do 4 weeks, the tutors do 8 weeks. So I can have a smaller number of tutors. So rather than having 12 or 14 tutors, I might have 6 or 7 tutors, which then enables me to sort of keep a closer eye on the quality of what's happening in tutorials and also the consistency, and we sort of build a team. It's easier to build a team with that number of tutors rather than so many. And so what in that reduction, what then is the idea is supporting students with these sorts of tasks. And you might like that little thing. This is the notion of wrapping around, an online tutor wrapping around. I know it's a nice blended learning term. You sort of wrap that around these assessments and the various other activities. And the online tutor really moderates discussion forums. Okay, so that's really the main aim of doing that. The online tutor does distributed learning, distributed support for student learning, and uses flexible hours for just-in-time support. And I'm always surprised to know that when we talk about just-in-time support, the students really mean last-minute support. We're able to meet student demand and peak activity, and so the online tutor is very flexible in the way that the hours are used, and moderate online discussions and connect students to resources. We also have some side projects about supporting students at risk of failing, sorry about the typo, and other duties negotiated. That's not all the online tutor does, but this is just what I'm emphasising today. All right, so the online tutor is just one person, so the nuts and bolts of it, equivalent to 5 face-to-face tutorial hours per week, which when you look at preparation time and other associated time, equates to about 11 hours per week, and those hours are distributed across the week, right, and also distributed across the semester. So that there's a presence online that is distributed for when students need to tap into that, that resource. The online tutor is an experienced face-to-face and online tutor, and values flexible working hours and working from home and so on. All right, so it's just one person. There's a bit of the nuts and bolts. And the way in which the support is provided is through asynchronous discussion forums, responding to learning needs, and linking students to learning resources. It's not just Q&A, there's actually learning going on, or promotion of learning going on. The discussion board contains a number of different forums based on the particular activity. So the assessment tasks, there's separate ones for each one. So as one assessment sort of drops off as being relevant, another one sort of picks up. So even though they stay open, those discussion forums become busy or less busy depending on the stage of the semester and the activities at that time. We've developed principles of practice over the time, right, and over several iterations of using the online tutor. One of these is respecting students, valuing students as learners and individuals, and respecting their circumstances, background and starting points, so you can get a feel for individuality in responding to students' posts, even though when you respond to those posts, you're obviously answering questions for all the students who then tap in there. The reading of posts obviously is much greater than the posting of posts. Responsiveness to students' learning needs, so it's targeted, timely and individualised support, assisting other students with similar issues. We always try to be encouraging and positive, promoting the use of discussions, recognising progress and contributions, using humour whenever we can to sort of, but really sort of, recognising, where the students are and trying to help them, promoting independence. So it's not just a Q&A. We are linking students with resources, asking them to think through the problems in a different way. So it's not just I have a question and we give them an answer, right? We try to help them to learn through that process. All right. So, concluding remarks. The online tutor is sort of wrapped around these assessments and guided by principles of effective practice. I've done a lot of work in this area, and I do have lots of data and lots of comments and all of those sorts of things, but there's no time to sort of present all of that today. So if I was to say a take-home message for the use of the online tutor is providing effective online support for student learning in a large enrolment unit. A first-year unit delivered across 2 campuses can be achieved with a modest allocation of teaching hours using asynchronous discussion forums. So I've put down, I just added that sort of note on efficiency there because I thought, have I got time to do that? Just a note on efficiency? Pardon? 1 more minute, I think that's okay. And I'm just sort of really reflecting on the Vice-Chancellor's email that came through this week about the financial status of the university and how, the problems associated with that. And one of the things that she did mention and actually identified in that email was casual staff and the amount of casual staff. And we know that in schools anyway, and it's been the case so on. And I guess what I want to say in a note on efficiency is one of the things about blended learning is that we often see, or it's sort of the mantra is, lectures bad, small groups good, that lectures should be blended out and we should focus more on small groups. And so I guess that's good. I mean, but lectures are not necessarily bad places for learning or delivery of content or any of those sorts of things. That's a discussion for another day. But what I just wanted to say on a note on efficiency is that really the costs are in the small groups. Right? So if you have a look at a large group, the costs are in the tutors, the marking, the resources for the small groups. Lectures are pretty cheap. They're really pretty cheap. And so this is just one way in which, and I did all the costs, I had to do all the costs when I justified this approach. This is one way in which the costs for face-to-face tutors have been reduced and then supplemented by the online tutor and still saves money. All right, so that's just a cost thing. And it's very useful for learning as well. All right.
Thank you, Tim. We do have time for some questions. Would anyone like to ask questions?
Yes, hi.
The director of the program, I'm interested in the cost.
Yeah.
So I noticed that you've got, you're working over 13 weeks and you're using effectively 8 hours of allocated 13. So
Yeah.
those other 5 hours that you're then allocating to be online.
Yeah, well, less, but it takes less. I mean, because one person online, during those weeks, not, lots and lots of tutors. Yeah. The other thing as well, I mean, and you're looking at the margins here though. But if you have tutors doing repeat tutorials over a fortnight rather than the 1 week, I mean, they're repeat tutorials. They have more repeat tutorials rather than the first tutorials. So you can do the cost to quite a, kind of.
Aside from that,
Yes.
that's the economic side of it.
Yeah.
On the educational side, it proved to be an excellent model.
Certainly, yes. I mean, I didn't present any of this here, but student feedback is very strong. We've never had any negative feedbacks about the online tutor. I've had specific surveys and focus groups and looked at response times to posts and the number of posts and all of those sorts of things. I've had a look at the ratio of posts to reads and all those things, and all those indicators are that it's very highly valued by the students and very effective as well. All right? But that's for another day. Yeah. Yes.
I'd be interested to know how your timetable goes online. Is it wrapped around the lectures, or is it any time, like after hours?
Well, it's distributed across the semester and across the weeks, and so it's really negotiated with the online tutor. At peak times, the online tutor uses the hours. So it's a little. In other words, it's a little bit and often, right? It takes a little bit and often rather than a chunk in just 1 day a week, and that's the whole idea. You do a little bit and often. You keep on top of the students' posts. You respond and let them know you're present online and that you're responsive and that you are interested in what they're learning and the issues they have in the learning. The online tutor, if there's a deadline for an assignment due, and we know that many students are last minute, the online tutor will do that over the weekend as well, but not routinely when it's not necessary. Okay.
How many posts do you average? How many posts do you average a week?
Oh, look, I can't remember what I've averaged a week, but I did have a quick look at for the first written assignment of this semester, and there were something like 220 posts in that particular forum, all right, which I think is down a little this year from memory.
What response time did students find?
Oh, well, students will want it within minutes, and we do sort of set up rules for these discussion forums as well, and around netiquette and appropriate ways of doing it, and that it's not a constant, it's not a 24/7 thing, and so we talk about that the online tutor will be there every day and as needed. Right, but a little bit of time, not all day. We've had no problems in terms of student feedback about response times because there is presence, but it's not 24/7. The other thing that I didn't mention, which probably is worth mentioning, is that what we do put a lot of emphasis on is modelling appropriate posts in a university unit when you're posting and asking questions to an online tutor or a lecturer. So I have models provided for students on what I would consider an appropriate post, that you post it to somebody, you ask a question or make a comment, and then you thank them for that, and you put your name at the bottom, and you write it in reasonably good English. So we do that, and we always model that. We also always remind students to do it in as polite a way as possible. So that's another thing I should mention. I think that's quite an important part of the educative process is how you actually do that as well.